4. Themos scrabbled amid the paper scraps and half-rolled scrolls overflowing the large table that dominated the centre of his cluttered workroom. Where was it? Where was it? Finally, he unearthed a strip of paper bearing a list of figures, which he compared intently with the second set scrawled on a wax tablet. Then he half ran to a celestial map pinned to the wall, displaying a rather over-decorated panorama of the heavens, in which the symbols of the zodiac had more prominence than the relative positions of the stars. He studied it for several minutes against the figures on the tablet. Then his thin shoulders sagged. So, it was true. For a long time he stood rooted to the spot. Then carelessly he tossed the wax tablet onto the table, where it knocked over an inkwell, the contents of which started to soak rapidly through the litter of documents. He did nothing to stop it. After all, nothing really mattered now, did it? Despair almost threatened to overwhelm him. Then he made an effort to straighten up and regain his composure. Panic would get him nowhere. He brushed back what remained of his straggling hair and tried to think in a clear and dignified manner. After all, whatever the circumstances, he was a natural philosopher, a man of reason and logic. By application of the principles he had studied, he would deduce the best course of action to take. For some moments he stood with his eyes closed, mumbling under his breath as he turned over the relevant factors. Then he blinked suddenly. Yes, that was it. An entirely logical and reasonable response to the situation that confronted him. Purposefully, he took his sun hat off the peg and placed it firmly on his head. He made his way carefully down the narrow stairs, favouring his arthritic hip, and into the passageway that led out onto the streets of one of Rome's more modest districts. So preoccupied with his thoughts was he, that he almost collided with the gang of slaves who were in the process of anchoring a long wooden pole into a freshly dug hole in the narrow pavement. "By all the gods, what are you putting this here for?" Themos spluttered indignantly. "It's blocking the path. Take it away at once." The work foreman interposed himself between Themos and the labourers. He assessed Themos's dress and accent and said firmly, "All right, Greek, keep it down now. This is permitted construction, you know." Themos drew himself up as far as his height allowed. "I, sir, am a citizen of Rome and the Dominion, and I demand free and unobstructed passage down my street. What is this monstrosity?" "Don't you read the notices, citizen? This is for carrying the new wired lighting along a couple of streets. They've got some decent houses there who are having it put in, and the company have got permission to run the lines through here, so let's have no more of your complaints." To the foreman's surprise, Themos started to laugh in an unsettling, slightly hysterical manner. "Light! Light!" he kept repeating between guffaws. "Oh, there'll be plenty of that soon enough. Then they won't need your wires and poles." He stopped abruptly and fixed the confused man with bulging eyes that held a distinctly manic gleam in their depths. "Or else there'll be no light at all," he announced dramatically. "What will you do then, eh? Run your wires over the whole world to light it?" And he tottered off, intermittently laughing and muttering, in the direction of the nearest tabernae, where he proceeded to get systematically drunk. The ear-splitting clatter of Strabo's compressed air chisel reverberated around the narrow, steeply angled shaft that had been painstakingly cut and braced through the strata of earth and rubble. Beside the bulky form of Strabo, Decius levered a new wooden beam into place, while Tyro shoved the excavated material into a wicker hood, ready for sliding down the shaft by means of a rope pulley. Dust hung in the air, turning a hazy yellow in the gloom of the wire-light work lamp, the power cable of which also ran back down the shaft. The lamp blinked 3 times, and the men gratefully stopped work at the signal. The clatter of the drill faded away, and they made their hunched and slithering way down the shaft, pulling off their makeshift masks and ear protectors as they went. There was a small, level chamber at the bottom of the shaft, just large enough to allow Strabo to stand upright. Here, the excavated earth was transferred to one of the trolleys running along a set of wooden rails that disappeared down a horizontal tunnel, which also carried the power and compressed air cables. The three men crouched down on the tiny railway cars and pulled themselves along by their hands for almost 100 yards. The other end of the tunnel emerged into the excavated cellar of what had been a modest townhouse. Now it more closely resembled a miner's camp. In one corner was the small, hissing steam engine that powered the drill compressor pump. The smoke from the engine was gathered in an improvised flue pipe, which ran away to the upper floor. Stacked about the walls were the paraphernalia of excavation: tunnel props, coils of rope, picks, shovels, and hods of rubble, a pile of firewood for the engine. The chamber also contained Cassiodorus, who solicitously offered mugs of water, which they downed thirstily. "Well done, lads," Cassiodorus said encouragingly, as the three stretched and massaged their aching muscles. "Just another few cubits and we're there." Among his peers, Cassiodorus was known as Cassiodorus the Rat, due to his undoubted resemblance to that hardy rodent. It was especially noticeable when he smiled, as he did now. He had the appropriate teeth. All he lacked, apparently, were the whiskers. "You've been saying that for the last 5 days," exclaimed Decius, pulling off his heavy gloves and examining his fingers carefully. His regular work required a certain lightness of touch, combining a sharp blade and the cords of money pouches. He was anxious not to develop blisters. "Months we've been at this. I don't think you've any idea how far there's left to go." "Might come out in the middle of the forum," rumbled Strabo, chuckling at his simple humour. He caught sight of Cassiodorus's expression and shrank like a chastened boy. "Sorry, Cass," he mumbled. Tyro opened up a new line of descent. "And what about equal time up the shaft, eh? Don't see you up there very often. No, you like to keep cosy out here doing the light work." It was an effort, but Cassiodorus assumed the demeanour of a good man misunderstood. "Lads, I'm shocked. I really am. Do you think it's easy stoking and oiling that hot engine all day? And if the guards should find this end of the tunnel, who would they meet first? Who would have to hold them at bay, sacrificing himself while the others got away? Who would be the first to turn the rest in so he could save his own skin?" continued Decius. "Anyway, there's only one way out, so where would we be escaping to?" "Ah, all the more reason to get the shaft finished then, isn't it?" Cassiodorus pointed out, then continued before the rest had a chance to think. "After all, who set all this up? Who is planning the greatest robbery this city has ever seen, and, out of the goodness of his heart, has offered you a percentage?" "Equal shares," muttered Strabo. "Same thing," said Cassiodorus quickly. "Better be," Tyro added menacingly. "While we're about it, who paid for most of the tools? Decius here. Well, his purses anyway. And who stole the engine? I did." "I carried it in bits," Strabo said proudly. "All right," exclaimed Cassiodorus, waving his hands in a placating gesture. "Everybody's put in something. But you remember just who it was who found out where they'd filled in with rubble instead of proper masonry? And who found this house? And who drew up the plan?" He pulled the familiar, grubby, much-folded sheet of parchment from an inner recess of his tunic and proudly shook it open. It was covered with scratchily drawn plan views and sections through one particular building, overlain with a web of sightlines, bearings, and angles. Here and there were blocks of figures and complicated-looking calculations. Some of these were actually necessary. The rest he had added for effect. Cassiodorus's tone became hushed, as though awed by his own words. "That's it. Feast your eyes, lads. That's the path to riches marked out there. Riches beyond your wildest dreams. You can retire on this and live in a place as big as Alexander's, and stuff it with dancing girls and slaves, and you can eat off gold plates, and you won't have to lift a finger for yourself ever again. No more thieving and dodging the watch and living in stinking rooms and thinking any moment it'll be the knife in the ribs and a quick trip to the bottom of the Tiber because someone's crossed you. Life would be one long bacchanalia, and all it needs is for you to dig just a few more small chunks of rock. There was a thoughtful silence filled by imaginations briefly unchained. Then the others exchanged shamefaced glances. Put like that, it seemed foolish to complain about a little bit of digging. It was very dark. The slow, booming voice seemed to be talking to itself. Sky turn, sun goes down, stars come out, turn slowly, moon rises, now quarter size. Clouds come from the west, winds blow and rain falls, stars fade, new day, sun rises. Oh, you come back? Long time you no speak to me, thought you'd left me, promised me never alone again. Yes, I know, replied the cool, commanding voice sharply. That was not my fault. That was your clumsiness. Do that again, and I will leave you alone forever. Do you understand? No, leave me, not if you obey. Now, show me what you have done. Have you read anything else? No, told you, can only read once. But been keeping busy. Look, me show you. After they had bathed and dressed the queen, her slaves attended to her makeup. A white base was applied to her face and arms to keep them attractively pale. Her lips were painted, and a little colour rubbed onto her cheeks. Aquamarine powder shaded her eyes, which were then outlined and highlighted with antimony and coal. When they were done, Cleopatra Selene dismissed them and stood alone before the big, full-length mirror in her dressing room. She always did this before an important social or political meeting. She wanted to look at herself without distractions, to see herself as others, especially men, would see her. It was not vanity. Her mother had taught her that. It was simply the natural way of things. One used whatever tools were available to achieve a purpose. Physical appearance was one of those tools, one which was effective against men in particular. Had not her mother proved this at least twice? She smiled to herself. The delight was that, try as they might, beauty almost always blinded them to what lay underneath. However much they might believe they could look beneath the skin, they always found it hard to accept that an intellect superior to theirs might be concealed within an attractive exterior. At best, they might think they had discovered some shallow subterfuge and congratulate themselves on their success at not being deceived by beauty. Too late, of course, they would discover that they had not looked deep enough. Intelligence, beauty, and power. All three could coexist together. She was proof of that. So, Cleopatra Selene, child of the gods, queen of the Nile, ruler of the eastern realm of the Dominion, examined her reflection critically, as a good workman might a tool she was about to employ. Representatives of the provinces of Cyrenaica and Numidia were seeking audiences with her today, so she was dressed in a traditional Egyptian style which she had fashioned to suit her purposes. Crowning everything was an intricately beaded vulture headdress shot through with gold thread. Over her shoulders was a broad collar of precious stones. Below that, she wore a long, tight-fitting dress of finest, almost translucent linen, belted with a golden sash. Jewellery, in the form of finely wrought bracelets, anklets, and rings, completed the ensemble. Yes, she decided, turning to one side and then the other. The effect was suitable for her particular guests. Had they been from the Aegean lands, she would have modified her costume slightly in the Greek style, to remind them of her dynasty's links with Alexander the Great. Had they been from Rome, she would have worn a dress cut and trimmed in that style. Romans preferred ostentation in their own manner, and, for the moment, she flattered their ideas of suitable costume which reflected their lingering republican ideas. She was acknowledged freely as queen only by the Eastern realm, as had her mother before her. It had perhaps been her parents' hardest but wisest decision not to force their claim to divine power on Rome. Marcus Antonius had been elected permanent consul of Rome, taken the ancient title of praetor, and been made dictator for life, but never emperor. Rome had not been ready for divine rule by the husband of the Queen of the Nile 20 years before. Now, her daughter was effectively a triumvir of a far larger dominion, but she still wanted the prize her mother never had. After all, it was her destiny. Soon, she thought, soon. In its way, the mirror before her was symbolic of impending change, thought Selene. It had been made using knowledge of the drawing and silvering of sheet glass revealed to them by the oracle. Daily, she delighted in its honest, perfect reflection, so superior to the small, polished copper mirrors she used when she was young. She paused, frowning, then leaned forward curiously, examining the ornate frame of the mirror. There was something slightly different about it which she could not quite name. She touched the frame and became aware of the faintest of tingling sensations. A slim, strong, disembodied hand reached out of the mirror's surface and clasped her wrist. Cleopatra Selene had time only for the briefest yelp of shocked horror before she was pulled through the face of the mirror and vanished from the room. For a moment, the mirror shimmered like a pool of quicksilver. Then it became still once more.